Good morning. Good morning to each and every one of you. I want to welcome the members of the Auditor General's Department, the representatives of the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Chaguaramas Development Authority, and the members in the public gallery, and very importantly, members of the media. My name is Boindradat Tiwari. I'm the chair of the committee. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Chaguaramas Development Authority for the years 2008-2014. The committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the Chaguaramas Development Authority, CDA, in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to whatever these challenges might be. The role of the committee is to help the CDA improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. The chairman, this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @ttparliament. Before I proceed, I want to indicate and declare my interest in this matter. The part of the period that is covered here, 2012 to 14, are years during which, in my capacity as Minister of Planning and Sustainable Development, the CDA fell under my charge. So 3 of the reports would be related to the period in which I served. I raised this matter in the pre-hearing with my committee and indicated that I would be prepared to recuse myself or to declare my interest here, and the committee agreed that I should proceed to declare my interest and proceed with the meeting. So I state that at the beginning. This will be conducted as any other meeting, and we will do it with the greatest of objectivity and fairness, and the objective is always to take a developmental role and a corrective stance in terms of ensuring that the entity that we are examining is better off when they leave this meeting, and secondly, that they will be better advised in proceeding with their business as they go forward. I will ask my other colleagues on the panel to introduce themselves. And there are just 3 of us this morning. We may be joined by other members of the committee later. And after that, I will ask the members representing the ministry and the Ministry of Planning, and also the CDA to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask the Auditor General's team to introduce themselves, and then we'll ask the Permanent Secretary and the Chairman of the CDA to make short statements, and we'll begin the questioning. Okay?
Adrian Leons, member.
Good morning again. Taharko Bika, Vice Chairman.
Okay, would you, starting with the Permanent Secretary? Yeah.
Joanne Deoraj, Permanent Secretary.
Melanie Noel, Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary.
Interesting. Jai Karan, Auditor 2.
Jacqueline Weeks-Penko, Director Planning Division.
Good morning to the committee. Andrea Julian, Senior State Counsel.
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Deputy Dilraj Batu Singh, the Acting General Manager at the CDA.
Good morning. I'm Wayne Lewis, Financial Consultant for the CDA.
Good morning. Robert Cesare, Board Member, CDA.
Good morning, Wendy Innes-Dimas, board member.
Okay. Is there any reason why your chair is not here?
Well, I believe the invitation asked for senior officials, so we are representing the CDA.
Okay. All right. Sorry? Okay. The secretary has just advised that an invitation was sent to the chair. So, could I ask the Auditor General's?
Good morning, Centrani Macharan, Assistant Audit Director.
Good morning, Riaz Ali, Assistant Audit Director.
Good morning, Shiva Stranan, Assistant Auditor General.
Okay. All right, so we'll proceed now. Permanent Secretary will make a statement, and you will make a statement on behalf of the board then?
Yes, I will.
Right, okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. On behalf of the Ministry of Planning and Development and the Chaguaramas Development Authority, I'd like to state that we welcome this chance for open discussion before the national community via the Special Parliamentary Committee. One of the key objectives of the Chaguaramas Development Authority is to ensure that all development initiatives undertaken by the authority are in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Planning and Development is committed to working with the CDA to ensure that these objectives are met and achieved. The Ministry has been looking at systems and other ways to support the CDA in moving this development of both the authority and the Peninsula forward in accordance with national development objectives, and therefore we thank the committee for this opportunity to have further discourse on how to move this process forward. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman and other members of the Public Accounts Committee. On behalf of the CDA, I take this opportunity to thank you all for convening this session, as the CDA has come prepared to elaborate and clarify any queries on its audited financial statements for the period 2008 to 2014. We are well aware of the importance of examining the audited accounts of all state enterprises, as the committee pays close attention to the comments made by the Auditor General regarding financial management. Rest assured, Mr. Chairman, that this morning our representatives have come prepared and ready and stand ready to assist with any information, for we understand and accept that the committee is here to help. Here with me today are Ms. Wendy Innes-Dimas, CDA board member, Mr. Wayne Lewis, financial consultant, and Ms. Deoti Dilraj Batusingh, the CDA's acting general manager. I have the privilege of leading the CDA's team at this morning's inquiry. Mr. Chairman, following the decision to close the naval base and hand over the peninsula to the government of Trinidad and Tobago in 1967, the Chaguaramas Development Authority was, by an act of Parliament in 1972, established to undertake the layout and development of the Northwest Peninsula and offshore islands. This was formulated in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago in conformity with the requirements of the Town and Country Planning Act, Chapter 3501. Mr. Chairman, the CDA's new board was appointed on March 15, 2018, and I must say, it has benefited greatly from the hard and unrelenting work of the previous board. The current board is once again under the astute direction of Mr. Narayan Lakshmi-Dayal, who will surely continue the mandate of its predecessors and developing the Northwest Peninsula in the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. In so doing, the board, together with the management team, will continue to administer the following strategic objectives: continued implementation of the strategic plan, which will guide the management team for the next 3 years and provide a roadmap to achieve its strategic goals and objectives. Strategically devising ways to continue to decrease the organization's debt. Continue organizational strengthening through the approved manpower audit that is now in its second phase as it increases alignment in the organization with its core mandate. Continued review of all operational costs with an aim of reduction. Improving our financial stability as we streamline the CDA's fiscal operations to improve financial reporting and management. Improving our relationship with stakeholders. Development of the agricultural lands at Tucker Valley and the development of Chaguaramas as a national park. In closing, Mr. Chairman, allow me again to assure all our stakeholders that it is within the context of this board that we will continue to review the state of the CDA, aggressively leveraging and reinforcing its initiatives towards conserving and developing this national treasure that is the Northwest Peninsula. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, both of you, the Permanent Secretary and the representative of the board of the CDA for your presentations. I will start with a few questions and then I'll ask my colleague to continue. And I noticed, I mean, the challenge for CDA has always been in terms of fulfilling its obligations for audited reports. I remember in 2012, there was a significant backlog before that. And the board has taken the position now where it has completed audit reports up to 2014 examined by the Auditor General. And you still would then have 2015, 2016, 2017. Can I ask when you are likely to bring your audit reports up to date and submitted to the Auditor General?
The 2015 audited reports are in draft. However, the board has looked at it and it requires review. We expect it to be completed with the assistance of Mr. Lewis, who was brought on board within 3 to 4 months. That's the 2015. We anticipate the 16 and 17 would be completed 6 months thereafter for each period. So within a year and a half, we expect to be up to date.
Okay. So in a year and a half, we can expect the CDA to be current with its submission of audited reports to the Auditor General.
Right. Not only submission of audited reports, but we intend to address all the shortcomings that have been noted by the Auditor General and all the reports coming straight from 2008 through 2014. It is one of the reasons we have not yet completed and merely submitted the reports. The intention is to fix the shortcomings and adjust where necessary. So when we present the 2015, all, if not most, of the issues will be sorted out.
So you have a plan and resources for fixing some of these issues?
Well, that is one of the things as I've indicated, Mr. Lewis has very recently been brought on to work specifically on the preparation of the reports. In terms of the resources that have to become available, we do have limited resources within, but we acknowledge that it is an important part of our function. It's required by the statute, so we will in fact be putting things in place, yes.
Okay. How would you, from your point of view, how would you describe the financial situation of the CDA today?
Our financial situation it's not good in terms of what our debt is, outstanding debt to the organization. We do really have in excess of $100 million in debt, which we are trying to manage as well as to deal with all current operational costs. So the debt in itself is something that has stifled the way we can operate and move ahead in terms of development, but we have not let it stop us from trying to put certain developments in place, but it is one that continues to stifle us as we try to get out of the debt, but at the same time cover all current operational costs and try to generate further development and revenue.
What constitutes the debt? Is part of it receivables of leases, and is it from other things? What
Well, that was actually one of the questions in the submission that was made to the group under 15, where we would have set out the full list of all the payables for $109 million, some of which is service providers that have not been paid since 2013, 14, 15. Most of it is, in fact, arrears of debt that is owed. Some of it is arrears that we actually owe to our own employees. Some of it is also pension arrears that is owed.
Okay, so the pension arrears are part of that?
It is part of it, yes.
Okay. In what projects are you now engaged and that are likely to come to fruition within the next 2 to 3 years, let's say?
New projects or existing?
Are you engaged in projects that are likely to yield something in a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Right. Yes, we are. One of the first priority items, which is also addressed in our strategic plan, is the development of the Chaguaramas Peninsula as a national park. Right now, we do de facto operate as a national park where we offer tours and other services to local as well as international tourists. The focus has been over the last year or so and going into the next year on developing the national park and really bringing the peninsula as a serious tourism destination to add to income for not just the CDA, but for the country at large.
Okay, so your main objective is to focus on establishing the peninsula as a national park destination, and to have and do you have projects in that to attract people to the destination?
So just to correct, it's not the main project. It is one of the projects. There are other small things in terms of like the current leasing arrangement that we have. We do have some available lands that we are reviewing to see what may be available for new leasing opportunities in line with the development plan. In terms of the national park development, yes, we do have sites, we have locations that we do need to improve or develop. For example, the Gasbury Cave, the golf course facility, Salmon Park, lots of activities within the peninsula that does need some measure of infrastructure or improvements in order to bring that level of national park and tourism that we speak of.
Yeah, well, that brings me to the next question. What new infrastructure work have you done or are doing or going to do in order to support the development of the peninsula? Do you have anything in your plan? Yeah.
Thus far, what we have done is we've started at the Gasbury Cave, where we have done major works on the cave itself in terms of electricals, upgrading the rails, etc. The cave, unfortunately, was left unmaintained for quite a number of years for some reason, and the CDA has taken, recognizing that it's a most treasured asset that we have, to really listen to what our stakeholders want in terms of what it represents for the country and CDA, and we are trying to do improvements here. So that has more or less been completed in terms of the small maintenance work. Going forward, we have in fact started drafting business strategies on each of our facilities, including the Gasbury Cave, the golf course, Salmon Park, all our hikes and trail, and what do we do as a company for each service or each facility to develop it as a business plan and a business unit to generate sustainable income for the CDA.
All right, I'll ask my colleague to continue, Senator Leon, MP Leon, sorry.
Yes, good morning. Just on your last point where you spoke about the business strategies to ensure these assets become self-sustainable, with the challenges you expressed in terms of the large debt, and how overall as the CDA, what is the strategy for the CDA overall? What is the current moves right now to manage the debts and to bring the CDA itself to some form of financial self-sustainable entity? And where are we now with that? And when do we plan to achieve this self-sustainable entity called the CDA?
Okay, well, one of the things that we've recognized, because of the financial debt that we're in order to get a lot of what we envision, we have to enter into certain partnership or stakeholder engagements. So that is actually one of the things that we've started doing with various state entities or even private groups to help us to bring all the parties together to improve or even maintain some of our facilities. It's actually one of the points that was raised at the Joint Select when we were here last year, and it is something that we've taken back, and we are actually moving towards that, and we have in fact done a lot of improvement to some of our facilities using this sort of strategy. In terms of when we expect to be self-sufficient, $100 million is a lot for us to get past to be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient, I understand to mean that we are able to pay out all our debt, pay all current operational costs, and even to be making profits to contribute towards the consolidated fund. We are continuing in that manner. However, if the debt itself is not something we can control or able to cover very quickly, it will delay how fast we can become sustainable. But it is part of our strategic plan, and we were hoping by 2020 we would grow closer to that. But it is something that we are continuously working on and strategizing as to how do we treat with the debt.
Is what you said by 2020?
2020, that is what our strategic plan would have envisioned or hoped in terms of aligning ourselves both with the core functions of the CDA. Once everything that we've set out lines up, but of course there are many things that comes, we have debtors who are not as patient in terms of saying that they will wait for their payments in terms of part payments. We have an unfortunate situation where persons may end up filing a court matter and we end up with a huge debt to pay within a couple of weeks or months, and that kind of throws us back a little bit in terms of our plans. Okay.
You also indicated in your submission that you have difficulty just meeting operational costs. The business plans and strategies that you're implementing now, just to meet the operational costs right now, when you envision that happening?
That is actually happening now. We are able to meet most of our operational costs. We do have an overdraft facility that is available to us, but over the last year or so, we've not always had to use it because we've been able to generate or sustain our revenue to some extent to cover operational costs. But it does not always happen because then we have debts for a particular month, for example, that has to come in and get paid, so then our operational costs gets affected. For example, like our utilities, etc.
Okay. All right. I'll allow somebody else.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Just following on from the last line of questioning from the chairman, you keep referring to the Peninsula. I've seen in the documentation before us that you would have done significant work and you would have hired consultants for rebranding exercises. Is the Peninsula the rebranded Chaguaramas, or have you all branded Chaguaramas in a certain way?
The significant cost for rebranding that you speak of would have been prior to this board. The rebrand at the time, I believe it was Chaguaramas.
You are general manager.
I am, yes. But when I was not there as general manager at the time. But the significant cost for that rebranding was somewhere close to Magic. That's what was the logo at the time. What we have been branding ourselves now, not necessarily somewhere close to Magic, but in terms of Chaguaramas, a place to be, national park, development, etc. But we have not spent any money in that rebranding at all.
Okay. But we are examining a particular period.
Yes.
Yes. So that's where I'm focused on.
That rebranding is on. Okay, sure.
So okay, so that rebranding has been cancelled.
It hasn't been cancelled, but in terms of we continue to use the logos, we continue to use the Facebook, things that we would have paid millions of dollars, of course, for. It continues, but in terms of additional advertising and all of that, we simply don't have the funds for it.
Okay. Now I'm asking because as Minister of Tourism, Chaguaramas can be segmented geographically. Mm-hmm. And I understand that Chaguaramas, you all offer quite a number of services. leisure services, leisure offerings, just one of them. What is your strategic plan with respect to the leisure, the tourism side of things, as compared to the other services like boat building and the oil field industry, and how are you all separating all those things in that one peninsula?
You mean in terms of locations of the activities, or just generally how we're treating with it?
Okay, so the CDA, you all are responsible for the entire peninsula.
Yes.
And you all operate and you all operate in the pursuit of profit, yes? But you offer quite a number of different types of services. One of them would be tourism-type services, the other industrial. In your strategic plan, how do you separate? And what is your strategic plan with respect to the tourism-centered type services compared and as opposed to the industrial-type services?
Okay, so in terms of the practicality of how the strategic plans envisions the division between commercial leases and resort leisure type activities, we do have different departments that are established to deal with the different. So for example, we have a manager of national park. The national park ought to then cover all the activities for the development of the national park, which would include tours, hikes, resort packages, etc. Then we have the manager of legal and leases revenue that covers all the leases, which may include some recreational, but mostly the commercial. So in terms of the strategic plan, the intention of the plan, and it's set out in the body of it, is that the manager of national park is responsible for ensuring that the Chaguaramas Peninsula becomes placed as a serious eco-destination location site for the country. Now, it doesn't go into the details of exactly how it will be established, but what we have been doing thus far with the limited or no finances is really forging stakeholders. I'm not sure, Minister, if you might be aware, we've had meetings with the Ministry of Tourism, and we are trying to form some sort of partnership to see how best you can assist us in terms of promoting the peninsula, because it's something we cannot do on our own. So we've had meetings. How do your ministry, promote us on an international front, even on a local front, on a staycation front, with all the facilities that we have available? So what we would advise, put everything into packages, zone the areas where there will be particular events, do a calendar of events for the year. Those are some of the things that we are doing and have met with some level of success so far. But in terms of a formal relationship with tourism, I don't think we've quite gotten there, but definitely discussions have taken place, and we've gotten the support so far of tourism, as well as our own ministry, as well as groups like National Trust, etc.
Yeah, I was thinking that the CDA could have perhaps a tourism unit, because you have so many product offerings. You speak about eco,
yes,
but then there is a water park there is the boardwalk.
Correct.
You all should be marketing the peninsula to the tourists that come in to the marinas and the other services that are offered. So I'm thinking, and as well, the National Trust, the caves, down the islands. So I was wondering whether or not, a tourism unit could be set up, and you all could market that on your own, because it seems to be something that has the potential to earn foreign exchange.
Most definitely. I think it's the limited resources is what is really kind of keeping us back from doing it, because marketing itself is costly. I mean, we have a very active social media presence, but that can only take you so far, So the partnerships that we've also trying to forge with other persons is one of the things that we're hoping. But I take the point that tourism or tourism unit is probably something that is definitely needed in terms of within the CDA, not just, or even if we have a partnership with Ministry of Tourism, it's very, there's something very concrete. There's an actual person designated to do it and push. Because so far, though we've had discussions, though people are supporting, we don't have that level of commitment. And I always say it, I said it to my peers very recently, we do need the commitment of Ministry of Tourism to really take us, because we do have all these wonderful facilities that people even in Trinidad don't know about.
Okay, so just moving away from that for now, I think, Chair, you may have dealt with the rent receivables, because you have been speaking about the rent payables. But what is the state of your rent receivable figure to date? And what is being done to recover those rents? Because I'm seeing persons owing in the amount of $1 million plus. What is being done now to recover the rent, to ease the financial situation?
Okay, so we do have, and it's included in our report as well, we've put a team together in terms of collection of rent. So we've started a very robust collection drive for both current as well as arrears. A lot of our arrears on the books are things that we do have to look at closer, because sometimes they're very old arrears that's still in the books, which we probably need to address from an auditing point of view. The ones that we are most definitely cleared as in ones that we can go after, those we've started the process, we've written the tenants, we've liaised with their respective, for example, there are a lot of state tenants that are involved. We have taken a more active role in terms of the tenants themselves, payment plans for, because they too, if you tell them they owe $1 million, they're not going to come up with that $1 million in 1 month. We've actually engaged in payment plans with some of them to pay. And we have, in 2017 alone, collected over $7 million in arrears alone.
Okay, so what is the figure now? Is it still at $27 million? Or is it less? Is it more?
For the rental arrears?
Rent receivables.
The current rent receivables?
Yeah, the figure.
Yeah, it's around that, yes. But,
27 million.
But there's a lot that's arrears, which is separate.
Okay. So you are actively pursuing it?
We are, and I must say we have had some measure of success, but we do need the cooperation of all tenants as well as state tenants to please pay their rents. We understand the economy is difficult and a lot of people have issues with their businesses, but we too at the CDA need our funds, and it is something, though we understand and we're trying some measure of discussion with other tenants or stakeholders, you know, to try to get to the point where we accept that we're all in a difficult position, but you need to pay at least towards it, and that has been working to some extent.
What is the ultimate sanction for a delinquent tenant?
It would be...
And where do you draw the line?
It would be for foreclosure for lease, it would be for forfeiture for lease if there's non-payment of a rent.
And when do you get to that point as a board to take the decision?
Where a tenant flat out refuses or does not make the commitments which they've indicated that they would make, and we then take it to our board and they would address whether we need to move towards forfeiture.
Okay, you don't have a policy as that, okay, if you're 3 months, 4 months, 5 months in arrears, we begin proceedings to recover?
I don't think we have a time frame, no, because it is something that we've looked at. I mean, we try to be somewhat accommodated with the tenants and their needs, and I think that is probably what has gotten the CDA in the trouble that it is in. And a lot of tenants have gotten so used to probably being in arrears for many months or as much as a year before active decisions are taken. But this board has already started considering tenants who we will probably be moving towards foreclosure if they don't pay their rents.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I guess you are serving them notice, the errant tenants, that is.
We haven't served any
No,
yet,
I say by your pronouncements today,
yes,
you are serving them notice.
They are coming, so I urge them to pay their rents.
All right, so now, in effect, I want to speak to the going forward, right? And the Minister of Tourism brought some issues to light. I myself have been a lecturer for some time at TTHTI, and seeing the developments in the Peninsula, it's promising. What I want to find out is, because I looked through the business plan, I saw strengths, weaknesses, etc., the challenges, a commitment to reduction of cost. I'm always guarded when an organization focuses heavily on cost and doesn't spell out in like manner the methods for revenue generating, because then we could end up just focusing on austerity, which does not necessarily solve the problem. It may reduce the gap, but there may still be a gap. Now, what exactly is the business model desired going forward. Because remember, CDA is really not only profit generating, but it's developmental. The real contribution of CDA is the corporation tax and business levy that 5 Islands will pay, that all the institutions on the peninsula utilizing carry dock, etc., will pay to the state, the jobs created, etc. So it's beyond your balance sheet, right? So let's accept that as a fact, right? You have a developmental purpose. But notwithstanding that, if you're looking to get in the black, as it were, what would be the business model? Is it that you're going to be increasing usage of the lands to get more tenancy, increase rents in terms of numbers of tenants? Or is it that you're going to have subsidiaries owned by CDA?
Subsidiaries
owned by CDA in some of the projects, because I just want to get some detail in terms of the actual, how the business model will look graphically for CDA going forward as you roll out the strategic plan, because I did not get that in the plan. So is it going to be, you're going to get more participation by other entities creating business models that are thriving, and then you will extract your rent, or you will be doing that as well as creating subsidiary companies, entities owned by CDA?
Well, let me say there's no real conversation about subsidiaries. We are currently auditing the availability of land, because we must bear in mind that Chaguaramas is in fact considered a national park. So there's only so much development that we can do. So we are, in fact, looking at the availability of land and see how best we could get this land leased in order to bring additional revenue as we go forward, in keeping with what is already there and a very stringent collection process, so that we could just, put together whatever revenue is available out there for us.
Okay, so CDA as facilitator. Thanks for the submission, board member. The other issue I want to point to is, you're talking about partnerships. I guess they could also partner with the hotel school, not to say that because I worked with them, but really and truly looking at job creation. If you have trained persons there, and of course, University of the West Indies for the tourism part. The down the islands thing, there's something I want to find out if it has been sorted out, because this can also affect perceptions of persons coming to use the park. Sometimes, a long time ago, when I traveled, when I went to down the island, but it's really on the mainland, there were no toilet facilities. So you can imagine where people did their stuff. It became so unsanitary that I never went back. I vowed never to go back there. Could you give me some? I think it's a place where it's a bay and there's some military vessels in the bay, but the local tourists will go to a beach there. I can't remember the name of the beach, but has that situation been rectified?
You're talking about Scotland Bay?
Correct.
Yeah, we haven't had an opportunity to look based on our financial situation. We haven't had an opportunity to really look and see how, in what way we could develop that area and what facilities we could put there. The fact that that area is more or less isolated, it would require some considerable cost in order to bring the amenities there. So we will certainly be looking at it, but it is based on the availability of funds. Oh, I'm also saying here from the GM that we also have an application through the Green Fund to get some money. If that comes through, then we'll certainly be able to apply it there and get that situation dealt with as best as we can.
Well, I just want to say that it would be good if you all can get at least the basic amenities at all the tourist sites up through whatever leveraging you can do from cabinet, right? Because that really would help the tourists. The other point I want to raise is the staycation. It's staycation, right? Trinidadians and Tobagonians, we love to explore Trinidad and Tobago. Places to stay the night would be important at affordable rates. The Cove was once popular. I'm not sure if it has gone down or if it has been revamped. under its ownership structure and so on. But even though that may not be under the care of the CDA as a business model owned by you all, the running of it affects persons' perceptions of the area. So if people think it's great, they will say, well, CDA is doing a good job, even though it may not necessarily be all. If it's not so great, it affects persons' perceptions of the area. Can you give any insight as to, because I looked at the projects that you're funding, I didn't see CDA, so the convention center in the past, not recently, but is any effort being made to address the Cove, the hotel, the room stock there?
Okay, if I may, in 2017, when we commenced the staycation in partnership with the Ministry of Tourism, all the resort businesses in the Peninsula, restaurants, accommodations were reviewed, and we made an attempt to partner with tourism to promote some of the destinations like the cruising, Chacacabana, West Palm, and the Cove. And one of the things that tourism would have drawn to attention is that you need to be of a certain standard for them to promote, for us to really promote. So it is something that we would have had discussions with the various resorts, and we would have explained to them, and I think attempts are being made to work together to lift the standard so that we can all promote what we have in fact already done for 2018 in preparation. Tourism would have indicated they don't just want to focus for the July-August vacation for staycation. Let's do it year-round. So we would have started, as of August 2017, going straight into where we are now in June, promoting staycation in the Peninsula. And we have partnered with some of these tenants in terms of their resorts and their rooms. And if you look at our Facebook page, Chaguaramas_Magic, you will in fact see that we are in fact promoting some of their packages, and we actually working out packages with tours, a visit at the resort, lunch at cruising, things like that. So it is something that we have incorporated as an entire package, but I mean, there's more work to go into it, but it is something that has borne fruit, and people are in fact coming for a day or a weekend and making use of the facilities.
And just to add, I noticed you did mention the Chaguaramas Hotel and Convention Center. As you're aware, prior to 2015, that was in fact leased out to somebody else who had intentions of demolishing the structure and putting up their own hotel. The CDA has so far a judgment. They took the CDA to court, and a judgment was entered against the CDA. So the CDA has now had now finds itself in the position to have to negotiate with these developers who the judgment falls against us to try to pay off that debt. So far we have been successful in stopping in working out something with these developers in order to clear that debt. And it's only when that debt is cleared, then the CDA could look forward to refurbishing and reestablishing the Chaguaramas Hotel and Convention Center so that we could have a more room stock available to the general public, and we could protect the historical value of the Chaguaramas Hotel and Convention Center.
Change gears a little bit. I may come back to that issue that you just raised, but I want to change gears a little bit. You mentioned the receivables that you have on rent, and I got the impression that you said that there was about a $27 million receivables that were probably active enough that you could engage them and perhaps get some of the arrears into the CDA's coffers. I want to proceed to ask some questions on that, and I want to also ask some questions that have been raised by the Auditor General in his reports that we have before us that have to do with internal audit, effective systems, good management, good governance. But first of all, how many, do you have a ballpark figure? I know you probably wouldn't have the exact number in your head. You might, I don't know. How many leases have been how many lessees do you have in Chaguaramas at the present time? From all time, let's say from it would have been sometime after 1967 to the present time. Is it about 1,000? Is it 100 and total?
115 tenants, yes.
And these are all accounted for, all paying tenants. That is to say, either the lease involves a payment, either they have paid or not paid, and therefore they have an outstanding debt or not. But it's only 115.
Yes, that's correct. So some of the tenants have lease arrangements, so there's an executed lease between the CDA and the tenant. Some of them, though, are tenants who might have been holding over, so their lease would have expired some time ago, and we're in the process of regularizing to bring them up to standard in terms of rentals, as well as review of the clauses. Some of them, though, are tenants who have been on the property by virtue of simply a letter of offer, and the tenancy arrangement never bore fruition in terms of the lease. There has been a delay on a lapse for some of the tenants. It is one of the things that the regularization process anticipates to sort out, because we do have tenants who exist, they are paying their rents, but the full terms of conditions are not captured in a proper lease between the CDA and that tenant.
Okay. What is the rent? What is the annual rental or lease value of your highest paying tenant?
The highest paying tenant, I believe, with VAT will be around 300,000.
This is 300,000 annually.
No, this is monthly.
300,000 monthly.
Sorry, monthly, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
That's with VAT as well as the service charge.
Okay. And what would you say is the lowest value of a lease that you have with a tenant?
Well, we have some leases where tenants have a nominal rent of $100.
Yes, that's what I thought, because I mean, there's a big range between what I remember of the early tenancies, in which many of those leases were virtually peppercorn leases, and some of the later leases that were done in the period under our coverage here that would have realized significant amounts, like the kind that you mentioned, they're $300,000 a month. And although there are different kinds of leases, because some would be private leases, some would be commercial leases, I think that the leases do offer CDA a means of really generating income that will allow it to have a development plan that it can actually finance. I mean, am I correct?
It is correct once the revenue right now from the leases, together with all other aspects of revenue, still does not cover our operational costs fully to even consider touching the paying of the debt. So yes, though it is significant, I mean, for any organization, because of the costs, the operational costs, as well as the significant debt, it is not something that we can rely on every month to be able to pay our costs.
Okay. How many leases have been granted in the 2016, 17, 2018 period? Do you know?
How many leases have been granted?
2016, 2017, 2018.
I think we have three new leases that were granted. Our focus has been on doing review of the leases that were existing before that needed regularization. Sure. So we would have completed a number of rent reviews as well as regularization. But in terms of new business, I believe it's around three new leases.
And how many leases were granted, let's say, between 2010 and 2015?
Because that was not specifically one of the questions. I don't know that at the top of my head. I can endeavor to find out and relay that information at a later date.
Okay, if you can let us know, we'll be grateful. But the objective, as I understand it, is to try to use a lease or rental strategy in order to generate substantial amounts of new or additional revenue, because you are now revising some of these leases. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
All right. I wanted to ask some questions that really come out of the Auditor General's concerns. The issue of internal audit, which is a general weakness in the public service, in public entities, but which is an issue for you. And you indicated that you are taking steps to fix some of these things, more effective systems, good human resources and management practice. What are some of the things that you are doing to make this better and to improve on what has transpired over the period that we are covering here?
Okay, what we would have done in 2017, which was even before the 2014 Auditors General's report came into the organization, we would have recognized, the board, when I say we, the board having reviewed the draft 2015 would have noted certain deficiencies and would have asked for a financial consultant to be engaged to really look at the entire department, the finance and audit accounting department, as to how they operate, what are the shortcomings, what are some of the recommendations that are made. This report was submitted to the board. Some of the recommendations we would have commenced. Simple things like ensuring there was segregation of duties, proper documentation, ensuring you had original documents before you issued a payment, making sure you have copies, etc., that are placed on the file. Unfortunately, the department itself would have suffered from some staff loss in terms of resignations of employees who would have gotten jobs elsewhere, etc. And we have not been able to really fulfill completely what some of the recommendations were. Having received, though, the 2014 report, I believe it was in April or so that we got it, the board, having looked at it, and the Finance and Audit Committee really took the firm decision that we need to fix this, and we would have again now engaged Mr. Lewis, who assisted in the preparation of this hearing today, as well as realizing that we do need to put proper systems in place and processes, written processes, formal processes in place to ensure that the department and finance and accounting department, as well as internal audit, etc., and the CDA as a whole, operates more efficiently and effectively.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to your submissions earlier, the basis and the foundation of your strategy for financial improvement is based on your assets, right? Why is it that a revaluation exercise hasn't been done since 1991 for plant, property and equipment?
Well, from my understanding, based on the records, it is something that would have always been raised in the auditor's report. The explanation given to me is that the finances available to do the valuation exercise is not something that is readily available. It may have been the reason why, rather than trying to fix some of the issues or whatever the reasons, that we simply completed the financial statements and submitted to the Auditor General. As I said, this board has taken a different approach where if the valuation exercise now, though it may cost some level of money, it is something that is required to really bring our records and our accounts to a proper standing.
My question is, and just correct me, does that affect how you come about with your lease arrangements?
The value of the assets. Well, how the lease arrangements are done right now, if a tenant, for example, is interested in a particular parcel of property, a valuation is done for that parcel. So it's not that we do a valuation for the entire area, which is the valuation exercise in terms of the assets, but it is important for the particular tenancy, the value, according to our leasing policy, rents are determined by the valuation process. So a valuation is done through one of our valuators on our panel.
Okay, and just going back on one of the questions Chair would have raised, in terms of the lease arrangements currently being held by the tenants, is there a policy for review based on maybe change in the value of the property that would be leased, or is there some form of duration in which there's a review process to ensure that the CDA is getting the value, basically, because $100 basically I can't see any property or lease arrangement that being of any benefit to your entity. Is there a policy or is some strategy being put in place to address those issues?
Okay, so first of all, a strategy can only apply where you don't have an actual lease arrangement with the tenant that provides for certain rent reviews or certain changes. If a tenant, for example, signs a lease with the organization that sets a value for 30 years, this is what the tenant is going to pay, there's no rent review, etc., or there's a clause which says that the rent is not to increase by more than 10 or 20%, the parties are bound by that. That's the law. We can't. It's landlord and tenant relationship. If, however, you have a tenant where there's no such arrangement in the lease, then there's something there's discussions that can take place, but we are bound by the lease arrangement. So if $100, for example, for a tenant, and it says that this will be his rent for the next 30 years, the CDA is put in a very difficult position in terms of negotiating with that tenant outside of the lease, because no tenant is going to really say, well, I would like to pay, you know, whatever my value of my property is, despite I have a lease arrangement for that value. Rent reviews now under the master lease, and most of the leases that happened within the last maybe 15 years or so, did account for a rent review process, which says every 5 years a rent review is to be done, a valuator is to be engaged, an independent valuator, and the rent will be reviewed to bring it up to current market value. So when I spoke about what the focus has been over the last 2 years for the organization, is really to zone in on the list of tenants who have that rent review clause in their leases, and for whatever reason it's not been happening, to really focus and get those rent reviews done and proper market value to be paid by the tenant.
Okay, which is good, right? But my concern now is, based on those that would have had these long lease arrangements, which basically almost free, has some legal advice been given to say that we cannot touch that?
Well, I'm an attorney as well. It's landlord and tenant. You can't, if you have a lease arrangement with specified terms and conditions, unless the tenant and the landlord agrees that they want to negotiate the terms of the lease, then you can negotiate. But the landlord cannot impose renewed terms and conditions if the lease does not provide for it.
So we stop there.
Yes, but of course, I mean, we do have tenants that the organization has been able to renegotiate for whatever reason. Maybe the tenant wants a different use, or he wants to add like a permitted use. So he opened, say, a bar, and now he wants to do a bar and something else. Those are opportunities for us to then revisit the terms of the lease and say, okay, if you're doing this X now, there's an additional value or rent to be associated with that. So in those instances, you can have negotiations with the tenant. But if it's the same exact terms and conditions that he continues to comply with, it's very difficult for a landlord to just impose new terms and conditions.
And in your estimation, what is the percentage of tenants that fall in that category?
Of negotiations? Or?
No, of being in a position where there's no negotiation and they're not really paying the value as the CDA would want.
I don't have that information available with me at this point, though, but I can endeavor to look at it and provide if you wish.
Okay. And I guess that will form part of the strategy in becoming some self-sufficient financially.
It would, yes, it would. So, I mean, one of the things that we've looked at most definitely, because our focus is on revenue generating, where tenants, through our compliance, we are noting that they are, in fact, sometimes doing things without even having come to us for approval or permission. There are discussions of either first, whether you are in breach, or if you wish to continue, it is something you need to seek consent, and therefore you need to understand that there's going to be a reevaluation of your property because of your use. So it is something that, as part of the strategy, we are already doing, yes.
Okay, because I'm sure persons would not have stayed the way they were initially
Some would
form
not
of
have,
changes,
yes, correct, yes. But some, of course, are worded so very widely that it's yes, it's really, they are allowed to do many things without being able to specify on one or two things that they're supposed to do.
And just to answer the first part of the question, so when, and you said funds would not have been available to do a proper reevaluation, when do you anticipate that activity to then be done?
Well, it is part of what is necessary for, maybe I could just have Mr. Lewis interject into how we propose to commence the
because it's not in compliance with the financial, with the auditing reports.
Mr. Lewis?
We recognize that that has been a shortcoming of the authority. We have discussed it collectively, and as you would appreciate, for the size of the peninsula, if we were to undertake an exercise in totality right now, it would be a pretty huge cost in terms of these fees, because usually valuators charge percentages of whatever the valuation comes in at. We are the process is ongoing now. We'll look at it either on a piecemeal basis, or we've taken a decision to consult with the valuation division and see if there's some sort of assistance that could be had with them. So within the next 2 to 3 months, we would have a definitive position on that, and we could always get back to the PCA on that, PAC, sorry, on that.
Okay.
But it is something that we recognize has to be dealt with, and as part of the general strategy to get the CDA right, that is something that the Auditor General has identified as a shortcoming for several years, and we will deal with it. It is a priority. But as I said, the exact how we're dealing with it, whether it's a piecemeal approach to the evaluations division or something else, we'll get back, have a position on that within the next quarter.
Okay. Last question. You indicated a debt of approximately 100 million that you all are trying to get over. One of the members would have indicated a judgment would have been made against the CDA. In terms of litigation losses with respect to, for example, judgments, what is the percentage in terms of the debt would that reflect with the CDA? Because I'm understanding that one of your major challenges in becoming financially sustainable is the large debt that you all have. And what percentage does the judgment play in terms of your debt?
At Appendix 15.03, we would have itemized the breakdown of the debt. Litigation consists of about $16 million, and this is just matters that have been filed thus far, and the approximate costs associated for the damages for the awards and those matters. In terms of the debts that remains, we do have ongoing pre-action protocols matters which are not included as litigation matters here, but it is something that we are concerned about, and that is why we are really, as I say, strategizing all the time as to how do we then treat with the debt without persons actually filing matters. So we are in continuous negotiations with these contractors and service providers who are very frustrated because they too have provided these services since 2014 and have not been paid for it. And we are really trying to treat with it as best as we can with the assistance of the ministry in trying to really cover some of the debt.
And in your view, how soon you think that can be sorted?
Well, it's really something that we will have to quantify with the authority and try to keep sourcing the funds and try to figure out ways not to have to take the matters to court and solve it beforehand. So we are working with them to identify the funds as soon as possible.
So is a moving
Yes.
target?
Yes.
Okay.
As we generate revenue, we are trying to treat with the critical debts, and it is something that we have been able to cover a significant amount. Well, I say significant for us because it's still money that we are generated outside of our operational costs, salaries, insurance, and pensions, etc. But in terms of how much we've been able to cover and at least to stay afloat for the last 2 years, it has been significant from our recurrent account. So in as much as revenue generation isn't at the level that we want it to be, we have been moving ahead, but a lot of it goes towards the payment of debt. So suppliers have been paid. A lot of them are on payment plans, in fact, and we continue to do that and negotiate with them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. What is significant is that during the period under examination now, the CDA stands guilty of flouting a lot of international accounting standards. We have seen in the documentation that at the authority, at the CDA, you don't have an internal audit unit. I want to direct this question to the ministry. What role does the ministry play in correcting this type of weakness?
Thank you, Member. On two levels. One, we had identified in around 2012-13, when the audited statements were coming in, that there were some weaknesses at the authority. So we had provided our internal audit systems within the ministry to go down and support in terms of setting up systems and trying to introduce better practice in accordance with the the Exchequer and Audit account. We are hoping that as the later accounts come through, we would see those types of changes reflected in the statements of the CDA. Additionally, we know that there is no one there at the moment, but because we're looking at trying to build better capacity at the CDA, and that is the kind of support that the ministry is advising in terms of the types of skills and so that will need to be put into a proper accounting unit at the CDA.
When do you anticipate
Well, this is a matter of urgency, so I would say before the end of the year, the board should give this as priority attention.
Okay, right. So I'm asking that because the internal audit unit would have been a check against another very significant weakness, which is your financial management function. I'm not sure, did you have a financial manager during the period?
There were a series of managers, yes, during 2008 to 2014.
Yeah. Because there were a number of weaknesses. One of the weaknesses, there were a number of flouting instances where the international standards were flouted. One of them would have been the capitalizing of sums less than $1,500. And I mean, I'm not an accountant, but it seems as though this would tend to pad a bit your financial management statements. Perhaps Mr. Wayne Lewis could answer this. Could you describe the weaknesses and what is being done to correct them?
I have been associated with the CDA for the last month and a half. And you mentioned that 1,500 issue of the capitalization. From a professional point of view, there were people who occupied those positions, but I believe without saying much further, because I don't know.
You can be frank, you can be very frank.
There were technical deficiencies, in my humble opinion, and professional opinion. And these are things that should not have happened. These things should have been cleaned up even before the they were sent to the Auditor General for audit. But I believe in dealing with things in the past. I'm very optimistic that these are simple things that, I mean, I've had enough time to go through with the Finance and Audit Committee of the board to review these deficiencies, these departures from IAS standards, and we will be rectifying and dealing with all these weaknesses, because our intention for the 2015 audit, when the Auditor General comes in, is to have a near perfect audit at the end of the day. So we're going to address all of those deficiencies. It's my purview to put in a lot of, we're reviewing the Financial Policies and Procedures Manual. We're tightening up on any areas of weaknesses, implementing controls, and ensuring that we adhere to all the international accounting standards. So in moving forward, member, I think within 6 months, I'm optimistic that there'll be a turnaround in the CDA from that point of view.
So once these things are corrected, having regard to this error of capitalizing sums less than 1,500, it may very well be that going forward, the losses being reported, when you take out all the staplers and so on, out of the assets column, the losses going forward may be a lot greater than what was previously reported in the period under question.
I would like, it is a possibility, but I'd like to think, I don't want to comment on that right now. For example, in dealing with accrual accounting, there are certain issues that we need to look at that could impact, there are many issues that could impact on your bottom line in terms of the treatment and non-adherence to the IASs. So until that point in time comes, I don't want to comment on it, but I don't think it will be anything material. But I think at the end of the day, let's just give it a 3-month period and see how everything panders out. But I'm confident that by the end of this year, we will have our finance department, our internal controls, everything in order, and be able to put ourselves on a solid footing for 2019 and beyond.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that. And to the General Manager, Ms. Patu Singh, what would have been the reason for spending sums out of the appropriation designated for recurrent monies for development programs?
Okay, based on my review of the files and the records, it would seem that certain projects would have been ongoing and payments became due to the contractor based on the contract arrangement, and there may have been a delay in the development funds being released from the government, from the respective ministry. And in an attempt to pay the contractor on time, and funds were then taken from the recurrent to pay the development debt to the contractor. That is what the records reveal, yes.
Okay, and one last question. One of the, well, pervasive throughout the period, the Auditor General would have identified the failure by the CDA to produce documents for audit. Set of those documents would have been relative to a U.S. account opened sometime in 2011, 2012. Could you tell us what was the reason for opening that U.S. account? What that U.S. account, where did you get the monies paid into the account? And what is the status of that account now?
Okay. the U.S. account is something that we are currently reviewing in terms of how it was set up, why it was set up, and where the funds from the account. What we've discovered thus far is that, one, we are unable at this time to find a board approval for the opening of the account. We would have also checked our file for, I think the question was specific as to align ministry's approval. Our records do not disclose a ministerial approval for the opening of the account. What we have located are documents which shows that the account was open and funds were placed in the account from one of our tenants at the start of his lease. So it would appear that it was part of a lease arrangement, and the tenant paid in US, and it went into that US account. We are continuing our checks in terms of all transactions. It started in 2012, right? All transactions that would have occurred thereafter. So the status of that account now is we have approximately $740, I believe, US dollars in that account, somewhere around that. That is where we're at. But until I get further information, I'm not in a position to say what.
So at this stage, you can't say, okay, what was the balance at the height?
But the account was opened with $1.4 million US dollars.
Right. Okay. And you can't say now for certain where the difference
funds would
between,
have gone.
Yeah.
No, based on the records, it seems that the funds were, throughout that period, wired to various areas. We are, in fact, trying to trace back with the necessary supporting documents where exactly those funds would have gone after 2012.
Have you found other instances of monies where you can't reconcile, or you can't find, or you can't explain?
I don't believe so. We do have, Mr. Lewis would have advised when he would have looked at the accounts, instances where you may have had improper recording in terms of finances, but I don't think it is so much of unaccounted, but just was improper recorded in terms of where it was placed on the books.
So in the very short time we have left, I want to just get back to the forward direction in terms of the trend for income generating and generation of the CDA. Now, if we look at, and this will be section 16 of the dossier that we have, on that first page, page 1 of 4, you have a graph there, and if a chart there, and I represented it graphically, and I observe a positive trend, right, for income, sorry, all right. Now, it started at 27, then it got 24 to 27, well, 28 roughly, and then it jumped to 31,000. It went down a little to 28,000, then it jumped to 31 million. It went to 28, then went to 39 and 32. So it's staying above a $30 million mark as at 2011 going forward. I want to answer regarding the leases. Is this linked to the types of leases offered that saw that significant increase in the income? And if so, are there any other leases you mentioned prior? I believe the general manager leases at $300,000, I believe it's per month. Are there any other leases in that category, like over $100,000 per month? And what are the types of activities and the companies that are holding those leases, if you may venture that type of information?
Okay, so
it's a two-part thing. One, the trend of income, if it's continuing after 2014, and if it's also as a result of leases, and what are the companies that participate with those leases that are above $100,000 a month?
Sure. The jump from 2012 to 2013 would have been as a result of tenancy income. For example, 2012 would have been the year that lease would have been signed with the U.S. account, and those were funds that would have come into the organization. In terms of the leases that have a value of over $100,000, yes, we do have a few of them. I can't give you the numbers right now. We do have a few of them that are over $100,000 when you add the VAT and the service charge, etc. Those are mostly industrial type leases. So the oil companies, for example, As I said, the lease's value is based on a valuation. The valuation is done on the land space and as well as taking into account what the permitted use is. So most of the oil-based companies carry a higher value in terms of the leases.
Can you venture some of the names of those tenants? Is it permissible?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure in terms of our landlord-tenant relationship, whether that is information that we can make public in terms of the names of the tenants and what sort of revenue they acquire and they pay to the CDA.
Okay, granted. We have state agents in a limited time, so I want to keep circumscribed. So I want to direct this last question really to the ministry. All right, regarding so Madam PS, regarding the as a line ministry, does the CDA give regular account regarding board minutes and so on, and as also? My apologies.
I'm sorry, no,
And also, regarding a subvention, is there any subvention? Because I'm looking at the financial statements, I'm not seeing anything that would indicate a subvention to me. If there's a subvention, can you elaborate? And as what systems you have to monitor use of same? Thank you.
Thank you, Member. With respect to board minutes, and so yes, we are in receipt of regular board minutes. They are submitted to the Honourable Minister, and we keep a review of those. The Minister also meets regularly with the Chairman. With respect to subvention, no, the CDA at present does not receive a subvention. This is normally tied to the income, and based on income statements, the Ministry of Finance would determine whether subvention would be applied to the CDA. That has not happened in the last few years. The way we support CDA is through the Public Sector Investment Program, and for a number of years we have been assisting them with the number of projects for the development of the Chaguaramas Peninsula. So that through the project planning and division, both the project planning and reconstruction division and the planning unit of the Ministry of Planning and Development, we have been providing financial support, project management advice, regular monitoring of the implementation of these projects, and supporting in that way. So there is a relationship with the CDA, and we are trying to build it so that we can improve on some of the systems and hopefully get the CDA into a much more financially viable entity.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. I want to return to for a last question for CDA. Given the lion's share, I would presume, of your income may come from industry, and we focus a lot on tourism here, what can you give us any indication as to what would be the approach to increase tenancy in industry, whether it be just offshore, marine, or on land, going forward, as I've not really seen it spelled out in the strategic plan?
One of the ways, as you know, being a national park, we are challenged with space and availability. And the fact that we fall under the 1974 land use policy, which is the law, there's very little that we can do in order to improve industrial revenue, because we have to stay within that 1974 land use policy. However, one of the things that we would have made a request to the ministry through the Ministry of Agriculture with the Commissioner of State Lands is that the CDA be given control of the seabed within the peninsula, in and around the peninsula. Because what we have come to realize is that a lot of our tenants, a few of our tenants, have in fact constructed marinas in the water, and they are charging considerable amounts of money for people to store their boats. And whilst they're paying just for the land that they're occupying, the millions of dollars are really in the water. So if we were to get control of the seabed, one, we could start to charge. We can charge people for those marinas and get some portion of revenue from those marinas that are there. And two, we can control the construction of these marinas in the water, because once any construction takes place below the high tide water mark, it now falls to the Commissioner of State Lands to adjudicate, and it's not within the purview of the CDA.
So are you saying that the Commissioner of State Lands or any other state agency via the Consolidated Fund generates income from these marinas?
That's a question that they will have to answer. I know if the CDA is given the opportunity to have access to the seabed, we certainly will be able to.
Would Madam PS be able to answer if you have any information in that regard?
Not at this time.
And how much income would the CDA believe it can generate if you simply increase the rents for the operators of such marinas?
Well, again, it will fall to a valuator. Every commercial lease that the CDA embarks on, each tenant, the business is valued by the valuator, and we go with the commercial value of the lease. So if given the opportunity to control the seabed, it will fall to a valuator to make a valuation, and we will certainly be charging the appropriate amount of money as recommended by the valuator.
I'll just ask one. We really should close now. I'll ask one question, and I'll ask the Auditor General and his team to proffer any questions that they may have on their mind, having heard everything today and having done the reports that we've reviewed here. And the one question I want to ask is that the 3 new leases that you have, what kind of businesses will they generate in the Chaguaramas Peninsula?
The 3 leases, one was for warehousing. I believe another was for jetty facility, setting up of a small marina for the island homeowners. And the third one would have been, I can't recall exactly what the third, but it was also a smaller lease. It was not commercial. Okay, there was no commercial leases.
It wouldn't develop anything. It won't result in any commercial.
Just to add, though, from Mr. Cesare's point, there's no waterfront property available in the peninsula anymore, and most of the oil industries require waterfront properties. So it is not, in as much as we do have some that are there, it is very difficult to say where we can increase commercial, industrial type activities if the land space is simply not available.
Okay. Do you have any idea what percentage of the land in Chaguaramas that you are going to allocate for development? Within the framework of a national park, what percentage of the park, it's about 22 square miles as I remember, what percentage of the park will be allocated for actual development while you keep the park as a park?
Right. So what we've done so far, we've looked at what the development plan provides for the national park, and it has identified certain areas. So far, that's where we are confining our national park development. In terms of ancillary services coming out of the national park, there are other facilities that we'd be able to develop, not necessarily as part of the park.
All right, but you don't know what the acreage is?
No, I'm not in a position to say that yet. We have not yet finalized the exact acreage.
Okay. I'll ask the Auditor General's office and the representatives if they would like to make some comments, ask some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Auditor General is in agreement with the requests made for written submissions by this committee to the Chaguaramas Development Authority. The dossier we found and the responses, they covered all the major issues in the management letters that were issued for that period. A few comments. We were told this morning that we should expect the 2015, 16, and 17 accounts within a 18-month period. Bearing in mind the valuation of the property, plant, and equipment is a quarter of the balance sheet. It's almost $250 million you're talking about. At the 1991 valuation done by the Valuation Division. Right? So we will bear these in mind while we are planning. We thank you.
Are you saying that the period should be shortened by an input of energy, basically?
Well, we are going to be getting documents within 18 months, 3 years of accounts. If the valuation isn't done in time, what would these accounts look like? Because we are on the brink of 30 years since the last valuation was done. So bear it in mind. And then in terms of a business model, if the loans have to be taken for whatever reason, what are you going to leverage? What will your balance sheet look like? 2, we appreciate the responses made with regards to management and retention of documents. Bearing in mind for 2008 to 2013, the reports were disclaimers, meaning we couldn't get sufficient documents to give an opinion. On just one more point on the strategic plan on page 6, on the bottom of that table, it was mentioned here to strengthen partnerships and customer relations. The response given on page 7 dealt mainly with customer relations. We would, if it's possible, get a little insight into strengthening of partnerships. On page 6 on the table and at the top of the page, the last point is strengthen partnerships and customer relations. On page 7, we believe the answer mainly focuses on customer relations and not so much the strengthening of partnerships. Because as we go into the future with the strategic plan of CDA, we just want a little idea, with whom are we strengthening partnerships with?
In our strategic plan, the actual heading is strengthening partnership and customer relations. So maybe that's why the response sounded as if it was mostly customer relation. But it does, in fact, cover other partnerships. As I would have indicated when Minister of Tourism was here, some of the partnerships would involve other state agencies as well. So it's not necessarily just customer-related partnerships. It would be state agencies to really bring the core mandate of the CDA to some sort of achievement and realization. So all partnerships that are necessary. Thus far, we have in fact engaged National Trust, we have engaged Ministry of Tourism, we have engaged PTSC, a lot of organizations to help bring the organization at a higher level. As well as, well, I don't have it here, Invest TT as well. We would have had recent discussions with them concerning bringing further investment into the organization and what may be available. So we're actually preparing something to present to them as well.
Thank you. So we should expect something more concrete with respect to partnering.
Yes, sure.
More formal. And just a last comment, Mr. Chairman. As we move forward with such a national treasure, don't forget, please, the procurement legislation is in place in terms of, strengthening your procedures and staffing requirements. The procurement legislation is very specific and to all statutory boards. The Auditor General is very cognizant of what could play out in terms of charges or penalties to members of these statutory boards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the Auditor General's office. And I want to thank you, Permanent Secretary, and your team, and members, well, the representative of the board, the CEO, two members of the board and the CEO, and the consultant here present. I want to thank you for your contributions here this morning, as I thank all members of the committee here for bringing this particular examination of the CDA accounts 2008-2014 to conclusion. We might have some additional questions that come up because of the answers that you've asked, and we'll send those to you in writing, and we hope that we'll get a response within reasonable time. Having said that, I want to thank you for your contributions, your answers, and your clarification of certain issues. We note that the CDA has the management of a very, very beautiful part of our country. And a part of the country that really is something to be treasured by us as nationals and to be used conservatively to develop interest of citizens and visitors alike that can enjoy the beauty and of the environment and that can be exposed to venues, activities, and commercial possibilities on the peninsula that could help to generate income and to bring viability to the CDA as an institution with the custodianship of that part of the island of Trinidad. We wish you well in your endeavors, and we hope that you will achieve some of the objectives that you've set out in the plan. I myself think that given the number of leases that you have properly negotiated, properly renegotiated and revised, and the leases that you have in the latter period from about maybe 2012 to the present time, the income generating possibilities are quite significant. The question would be how you deploy that revenue in collaboration with the funds provided by the Ministry of Planning and the Government of Trinidad and Tobago to make a difference in terms of earning potential beyond the leases. As I said, I wish you well, and we will look at the verbatim notes from this particular session, and on the basis of that, we will forward some questions to you for further answers. But thank you very much for your cooperation, for your submissions, and for your contribution here this morning to the public understanding of what is happening on the Chaguaramas Peninsula in terms of development, and the CDA in terms of economic and financial viability and sustainability going forward. Thank you very much.